very, very long day, people. But now I promise you, I'm all yours, okay? If anything happens that I need to know about, just let me know, because now I'm all yours. So welcome. How is everybody tonight?
Good.
We're good? Good. I always like to start out by seeing, what we can look at that's in the news. Reinterpreting the news is something that I think is a great thing to do on an ongoing basis. And when you learn to look at the news and the way things are reported differently on an ongoing basis, you can take the idea of it about reinterpreting what you're hearing, and you can apply it in your personal life. That's one of the reasons it's such a valuable technique to keep practicing and practicing and practicing, because you are very connected and attached to the day-to-day experiences in your own life. And it's very hard to become a little bit separate or dispassionate from your own happenings and say, here's another way of looking at it, and if I can step out of this and see it differently, I can find the benefit, and I can find how the universe is working in this experience to give me something of value. And that's one of the main reasons why I keep reinterpreting the news for people, is because if you can see it on a global scale, where you're not necessarily individually connected to the experiences and the happenings, you can take the process and apply it to yourself. And that's the idea. But the other part of it too, I know last time someone said to me that I should charge, instead of a fee to get in, I should charge like words per minute, because I spoke so darn quickly last time. And unfortunately for you, I can feel your guides have a lot of things they want to share tonight, so get your ears going really, really quickly again, because I have a feeling we're going to have another night like that. That being said, one of the things to recognize in this lifetime is that there's two basic ways in which we are giving ourselves opportunities to grow our soul. And the two different ways is, one, individually, and the second is globally. So as we experience personal growth, we become a greater empowered and enlightened and evolved citizen of our globe. Therefore, our energy changes in the way that we're perceiving global matters. And also, if we have difficulty growing personally, if we grow globally, if we can enhance our perceptions of what's going on around us on the earth, or in a particular instance or matter or another side of the planet, any growth that we have from understanding things differently and in a more enlightened way on the globe, then we can apply it to our own individual growth. So it works hand in hand. And most of us actually have a propensity toward being able to grow in one area better than the other. Okay, so I'll throw John Lennon under the bus, but he lets me, so it's okay. John Lennon loves when I throw him under the bus, so we'll throw him under the bus. He's an example of a soul, high vibrational energy, who had a human experience, and he understood the global experience in being here. He was knowingly a soul of the universe, and he was awesome in helping us understand our interconnectedness and love and peace and the things that matter for us globally. But for most of his journey as a man, he was an encumbered guy. He had a lot of interpersonal difficulties. He had a hard time maintaining really good relationships, and frankly, a lot of people couldn't stand him. So his growth didn't come through the inception of the individual experience, him understanding the effect that he had on the people that were closest to him, or even people that he interacted with, not until the very later years of his life. But it didn't mean that he wasn't able to be this amazing conduit for understanding things from a global perspective and moving all of us forward in our collective comprehension of what is the meaning of life. What are we doing here? What's the purpose? So like I said, we each have a propensity toward either using the modality of individual growth or global growth as a way to get all of the soulful knowledge that we can experience and that we can access. Okay, so again, getting back to why do I interpret the news? Because what's happening to a great number of people, or what's happening that the media makes larger than it might even need to be or actually is it's the same process of awakening, the same process of growth. And here's a funny way of looking at that. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Facebook. It's been around a couple of years. It's on the internet. On Facebook, something that's actually quite comical is we can see a person that is really kind and nice, and that we have a great interpersonal relationship with, and we know they have our back. And you know what? If we need someone to help us move on Saturday, we just call that person. They're kind and they're loving, and they seem to be somewhat personally evolved. And then you put a global matter in their sights, and boom! It's like, whoa, what happened there? You know, what happened to all that enlightenment going on inside that body of yours? Like, it just goes out the window. And all of a sudden there's venom, and there's ways of communicating with other people that are just not coming from a loving place. And there's a reason for this. It doesn't mean that the pole of the being is not enlightened at all. It means that that person has feelings of frustration in their life, or the feeling of not being heard, or the feeling of disempowerment, primarily disempowerment. And because they're too kind to be unkind to the people that they meet, there's a certain feeling of a barricade between us and the ideas of those who are operating on the global level. So we can be angry, we can be judgmental in the global arena, but it's simply a conversation about ideals or philosophy or ideology. Even though that's not true, at least it helps you to understand how some people seem to have this split personality when it comes to global versus individual. And then there are going to be other people who have the opposite split personality. You know, the gregarious person who everybody loves and center of attention, very kind, always doing nice things for people, always showing up outwardly. But then when he or she goes into his own home, he's like, are you kidding me? You're like so mean. You're so unkind. You're so nasty to the people under your own roof. You know? Yes, I'm talking to you. And it's so interesting. And the person sitting there with that person over a cup of coffee in their home, they're like, when we leave this house and you go to work or we're out with friends, everybody loves you. They have no idea what a jerk you are in this house. It wasn't meant to be judgmental, but it's you know, like when I do things here, when I'm prompted to do things here, they have purpose, not just for the facts of whatever the news story is in the moment. It's because all of these ways that we're looking at things and examining things are designed to help us to let go of our human baggage, let go of our misperceptions, and start to unify in that vibration of collective love, which is what we're designed to do. And this is just one more tool or one more mechanism to help us get there more quickly. Wow, geez, give me a breath. Right? Yes.
It's funny, you would think that the person who is more globally aware, you would think that they would have already mastered the personal to get to that aspect.
Yeah,
right?
you would think.
Yeah.
It seems actually logical, but it is profoundly amazing how often that's not true. Okay? And it's, like I said, we're all doing the best we can within our level of awareness. I think having one conduit work, one half of that work, is better than having none. You know, a lot of people have none, right? Terry.
But why do people do that? Because I know two people that are like that. You know, if you talk to anybody, they're the nicest, kindest people on the planet. But at home, they like actually give up their family to do other things for other people.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
And for each individual that behaves like that, it's a different story behind them. But it usually has to do with what they experienced in their version of reality when they were younger, and how they were treated. Were they invisible? Were they heard? Were they loved? Were they valued? Did their opinion matter? Were they allowed to make decisions? It all stems from the environment in which we are raised. Now, I can't emphasize enough how important those first years are for kids, for all kids. It's the time when we either disconnect or stay connected to our eternal wisdom. And our earth lives have ways of really separating us from that connection and from that knowingness. And we have to, if we stumble upon it in some form as adults, we have to relearn or open up again that stuff that we got separated from. But it always has to do with our childhood experiences. Always has to do with our childhood experiences.
What percentage of people do you actually think grew up in what you would call a loving, positive environment? Like 5%, 1%?
-8.
Yeah.
He's right. I work with all of them.
Seriously, what percentage do you
Less,
think actually came in to a loving family?
Right. Well, it's so interesting when you tend to say that it tends to be very black and white, a loving family versus an unloving family. What it really is there's a spectrum. And there's a spectrum of different ways that we're interacting with our kids. You know, some are physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual. There's so many ways that we interact with our kids. So you could be really enlightened and powerfully helping to promote independence in your kid in one arena, but then you could have so much baggage from your childhood in another area and just be completely devoid of the ability to be empowering to your kid in that area. So when you look at the infinite mix of how we can come to being a parent or being a caregiver or being a teacher or anyone that's interacting with kids, you can see that there's going to be such an enormous diversity of how kids are taking in that particular strategy or that approach. And interestingly, when you see even twins being raised by the same parents in the exact same environment, it also has to do with the vibrational energy of the child when they're born. So you can have siblings with relatively identical upbringings and experiences within close proximity of age, and each of them turns out so differently. And what it is why can one kid deflect a piece of information and another can't? Why can some person push back on something and another can't? Why is one sibling taking something in and the other isn't? And it could be you're taking in 5 of these and none of these, and the other one's taking in 5 of these and none of these. So the possibility of how we're affected by our childhood it's infinite. It really is infinite. But there basically is, if you're looking at love as the scale, there is a spectrum on that scale that the aggregate of what it is that we experience is either going to be in the vibration of love or in the absence of the vibration of love. And when you're looking at that spectrum, every single possibility of where you could fall with your own childhood is possible. And I would say how many are up in that top 3%, 5%? It's not a lot that have that truly close to the vibration of love opportunity to grow up with. But if you're over the 50 mark, if you're over the 70 mark, good. You got a good chance. You got a good chance. Make the most of it and help other people too. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So it is a matter of looking at all of the nuances of the way that you're raised too. I was just having a conversation with a client today, and here's something I bump into a lot with clients. I can have a client that had a big physical happening or 2 or 3 in childhood. And you know what? We get in there, we address it, we roll our sleeves up, there's resources for them, there's a lot of books and support, and they know the issue, they know it's saddled them with something that's hard to let go of, but there's a process. They understand the domino effect, they understand what happened, when it happened, how it affected them, and what they can do to become whole again. But there's just as many people that have had subtle things happen in childhood that are also profoundly difficult, and they can happen from the moment they're born until the moment that they move out of the house. But your frame of reference is only what you grow up with, so you have no comparative. If there's something going on in your family and it's not a big moment, like you were pushed down the stairs, or your mother cracked up the car and she was drunk, if you don't have a big moment like that you can identify, it's very difficult to understand how the small moments have affected you. So even that can be much larger than even a particular big event, okay? Like some people will talk about something like verbal abuse. Well, let me tell you something. Like if I had to say, well, you guys, I want you to come up and give me a 1-minute story of your life, and we're going to jot down who had it the worst and who had it the easiest, right? Well, the one that can show me x-rays and broken bones, they're gonna win. You had it the worst. Ta, congratulations. But you know what? The person that was verbally abused from birth and never had a physical injury, they might be the one that's the worst off because there's no way to identify the effect that it had on them. There is no support network for that. There is no conversation. There is no, I was verbally abused when I was a child. And everyone's like, oh, wow, you poor thing. Like, how did you get through that? We don't rally behind these invisible kinds of energies because we don't really fully understand them. We don't understand them about others, and we certainly don't understand them necessarily clearly about ourselves. So it's a very big answer. Everybody's childhood affects them in a different way. One of the reasons I make it such a point to say to anyone that has anything to do with a child is you never know when you're the point of light for a kid. You never know. You could be in Target and the kid's in a basket and mom's wheeling him around. You might say something to that kid that could be the point of light that makes him or her feel good about himself until the next point of light comes around. You just never know. Everyone needs a point of light, even if it's years in between those points of light. And then as we grow, depending on how we feel secure, how we feel that we can predict our future, that'll create the opportunity for us to move toward being more globally inclined for our growth or individually inclined for our growth and understanding. Okay?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that getting past the dynamics of some of the things that happen in a household is not the good things, that is the opportunity for the greatest spiritual growth.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's the biggest challenge, and
Yeah.
the assembly of the people and the getting past the difficulty that you do is the challenge that really can catapult you to the other
Yes.
side.
Yeah. Without awareness, you can't make an active choice to pursue a different way of viewing yourself or your life or your possibilities. So, when I'm coaching clients, intuition is my conduit, so I can help people understand things about their childhoods that they can't remember. And it helps because sometimes it's never, ever, ever about blame, ever, ever. By the time a person is coaching with me, they're past the blame part of their lives usually. It's more about comprehension. If you are, think of us, this is not an attractive metaphor, but it works. If you're a lump of clay when you're born, and you're the most beautiful lump of clay in history, and then this person's pushing it that way, and that one's pulling it that way, and this one's got this hanging off there, and this one's doing that, and all these people are influencing and molding your clay, how you look at the end of all that, it's not going to be your choice, and it might not be your version of beautiful either. So if you want to reform that clay, especially as you get older and the clay gets, a little bit more hardened, air dried, whatever, it's a little bit harder to bend and reshape this stuff. But you can't reshape it unless you know what it looks like right now. So you got to figure out how it got to look the way it looks. It's about comprehension, so you know what you're working with. Okay, that's what it's about. And when you have comprehension and you can make the leap from comprehension to understanding that whoever was not supportive of you in the way that you needed to be supported in your childhood, that they did the best that they could within their level of awareness based on how their lump of clay was misshapen. So when you start to understand how this just keeps going from person to person to person to person, that comprehension leads to you understanding that you're a worthy person, plus the possibility that one day forgiveness can emerge from you. Everyone thinks you can attack forgiveness. I need to forgive him. I need to forgive him. I have to forgive him. I have to forgive him for me, not for him, but for me. You can't attack forgiveness. Forgiveness emerges when you set the intention to have comprehension and to understand that whoever has harmed you did the best that they can within their level of awareness. And that's the process. It's an enormous process, but it's probably one of the biggest motivating factors for why I do what I do. You know, because I can't help every person on this planet, but if I can talk to enough people and help them be the point of light for kids, then we're going to have the next generation that stays more connected, and we're not going to have as many issues personally and globally that we have now. That's where it's going to come from. It's going to come from taking care of our kids. Now, the bigger answer, one day, many years ago, and it's probably in one of my books, I should know the answer to this, but I channeled something. My guide said, what a child needs, right? And every time I get something like that from a guide, I'm like, you know, wow, that's big. You really expect me to do this? You know, pass this on to someone else, because how am I going to write that out and have it be the answer? And anyway, so I did get myself out of the way, and I was able to channel this answer of what a child needs. And I have to tell you, you know, looking back on it, because I didn't create it, it was brilliant, because it talked all about what a child really needs, with that balance of being supported and being protected, but being guided and letting the child explore and letting the child fall. The basics of what a child needs to be able to stay connected to their soul is actually quite simple, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. So even though, one of the reasons I'm saying this is a lot of people say his family was so loving, right? Well, sometimes loving can actually be suffocating, smothering, killing someone with kindness. You don't let them breathe, you don't let them decide, you don't let them ride their bicycles. So it's not just about, does it mean that parent didn't love their child because they're suffocating them? No, they see this as the most loving way that they can be a parent, but it's not providing an environment that child can thrive or stay connected to their soul's wisdom. So loving isn't the right word. It's how connected we are to the vibration of love. And a self-loving parent has more of an ability to allow their child to emerge and to become who they are by providing appropriate guidance based on their level of maturity and expanding their liberty and their freedom as they mature in all of the areas of maturity. You know, it's a balance, it takes a balance, but when you start to tap into intuition, your gut tells you, your gut tells you if this feels right or if this doesn't feel right. Immediately you know. Immediately you know if this feels right or not. Michelle, back a while ago, did you have a question?
I was just thinking about what you were saying about global as opposed to, home, doing things at home. To me, to do things globally is easier than really to deal with an everyday kind of situation, So I would think that it's, if you had it at home down pat, I would hope that it would be easier than to see globally.
Yes.
I don't see it the opposite.
Yes. And I have to say that if we're looking at how you are radiating with the vibration of love, you're right, because you can get appreciation and accolades when you're doing something globally, when you're doing something outwardly. Everyone's patting you on the back and good job, and they think you're the best. But if you're doing something by just having like a decent conversation with your kid, when it could have gone awry if you hadn't pulled yourself together, there are no blue ribbons at the end of that. There are no accolades. Maybe you're going to get a pat on the back when your kid is 50, and maybe you're not. There are no blue ribbons. There only is that feeling of self-love and knowing that you're acting in the best interest of your kid. So you're right. There is a lot more ability to stroke your ego if you're doing things outside of your home, and a lot of people become addicted to the external gratification that they get from other people appreciating them. And everything I do, like Begin Here, is basically helps you to grow your self-love. The only way really ultimately to really build a happy life, one that can be sustainable, is to grow your love of self. And love of self makes it very, very difficult to be cruel to anyone or anything. If you love yourself, there is no need for any cruelty. So usually the individual is increasing rapidly the experience inside the home, and it does overflow outside of the home. The ego is a very funny thing. It's a very funny thing. And I didn't really understand what the ego is, and I'm not talking about, ego like, being conceited or something like that. I'm talking about the thing that is your face, not your being, but the face that you're putting out there. And it can cause you to become very, very connected or addicted to shows of appreciation or a recognition for a certain thing, even recognition for negative. A child that is harmed within the first couple of years of life will often turn out to be an antagonist, and they're going to be, negative and bullying and, maybe even violent. But they can also become addicted to the attention that they get, even though it seems to us to be negative attention. So the ego is one of the hardest things to try to put away and separate from, so that you can find your soul underneath your human needs and your human experiences. Was there any other question? I'm glad I knew that I thought I saw your hand before. All right, good.
I almost forgot I had it up.
I remembered.
Thank you.
Because I saw it. All right, so that all said, how many words per minute was that? That all said, let's talk about the news, okay? I have an agenda. I don't usually, but there is something in the news that I would like to talk about, and I really don't want to talk about the election. So instead of talking about that, let's talk about something different. And I think this particular incident, it brings up a lot of interesting topics to talk about from a different perspective, and that is, hope I have his name right, but Kaepernick. Is everyone familiar with? I got the name right?
Kaepernick.
What's his first name?
Colin Kaepernick.
Colin. Eric, does everyone know the backstory?
Nope.
All right. Okay, so
That's what I was gonna do.
who would like to give the backstory really quickly? Anyone?
He's a backup quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
And he decided he was not going to stand for the national
Oh,
anthem
okay. Okay.
because he was protesting what he was protesting.
Okay, all right. And so it did spark a lot of controversy in our country and in our homes and in our workplace, and people formed really very vivid opinions on one side or the other. Yes? And it's an interesting thing. And I'm gonna come in from, what's my role for you? My role is to be a conduit to universal wisdom. I really don't care about the facts on earth the way everyone else seems to care about the facts on earth, because all we're really doing is working through our soul's development here. So what difference does it make if you're going to get your aha moment through helping a bird fly or by taking the trash out at the end of the day? What difference does it make, right? They're interchangeable. Grow, you grow. So coming at this particular topic from a global perspective, from a universal truth perspective, I want to give you my angle on it from all that I have experienced and explored in releasing the human side of me and letting go of the ego and knowing the bigger picture about what the heck we're all doing here, okay? And here's how that looks for me. Everyone pretty much knows that my very first big psychic moment was during the attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11. It was a profound moment that changed the course of my life. Not immediately, but over years to come. And it took a lot for me to be able to interpret how could I be 40 miles away from New York City and experience what was happening there, and in such a valid way to have that opportunity to be two places at one time. It made me very curious about consciousness. Made me curious about things that I'd never really thought about, and made me explore consciousness, the human journey, are we eternal, and so on, to the point that I think I feel really comfortable with my version of our reality here, and that gives me a lot of peace. But one of the things that happened during that period, and I couldn't explain it at the time, I can explain it now, but in the aftermath of 9/11, everybody was waving American flags, and you would drive down the streets and people were flying flags on their cars and so on. And I still didn't understand much about the process of enlightenment. I didn't understand what I experienced that day. I was living in the same drama and chaos of everybody else on Long Island, helping people, trying to sort it out, trying to raise my kids, trying to keep, some semblance of hope and peace and possibility going. But what was really weird is when I would see these flags, I never felt compelled to hang one, and I never felt compelled to put one on my car. And I started over time to get knots in my stomach when I would see them on the highways and I would see them all over the place. I really started to get these knots in my stomach. That doesn't make any sense. Why would I get knots in my stomach when I see the American flag? I really didn't understand it because I didn't understand what intuition was yet. What I came to realize years later, as I started to be able to communicate with non-physical sources and have real conversations with them, I would go back and I'd ask a million questions. Why this? Why that? Why did I do this? Why did this happen? Little things, big things, everything. I asked everything. And eventually I came to the point in 2005, 2006, where I said, why did I get sick to my stomach by the flags? That doesn't make any sense. And what was indicated to me was a really interesting way of looking at it. There are two ways that we can honor a flag. One way is to show something that we have in common with others and to see the camaraderie of that experience. And that's how we can honor a flag, that we have this similarity and we feel joyful of having these similar views or opportunities or experiences with that. And we can identify ourselves through aligning with the flag. But another way that we are looking at the flag is it's not unifying, it's divisive. What was happening after 9/11 is those who were flying the flag, oftentimes, not everyone, but oftentimes they were showing superiority to other countries, particularly the ones that they thought were the terrorists that brought down the towers. So it was an act of vengeance, it was an act of defiance, it was an act of rebellion and anger that we are better than you and you're never ever going to take us down. So there were two things going on with the flag back then. There were those who were really trying to honor the people that lost their lives, were trying to